What up, YouTube? Here with a post-fight video of the Naoya Inoue versus Marlon Tapales fight. Now, this was for all the titles in the Super Bantamweight division, and Naoya Inoue made history by becoming the second fighter in the modern era to be undisputed champion in 2 different weight classes. At the same time, last year, he became undisputed Bantamweight champion after defeating Paul Butler and becoming undisputed at Bantamweight. Then last week, he defeated Marlon Tapales via 10th round knockout to become undisputed at Super Bantamweight. He, in 2 consecutive years, became undisputed champion in 2 different weight classes. Now, Naoya Inoue is in his prime. He's only 30 years old, and for him to accomplish that is a good look for Naoya Inoue. He's well on his way to cement himself as not only arguably to be there as one of the greatest fighters to come out of the continent of Asia, and he's got much more years to go in his career. And with the momentum that he got going on right now, and depending on how he finishes his pro boxing career, we'll see if his resume matches up to par with who many consider to be the greatest fighter to come out of the continent of Asia, that being Manny Pacquiao, the most reputable fighter to come out of the continent of Asia. And Naoya Inoue has already accomplished what Manny Pacquiao didn't accomplish during his illustrious professional boxing career, and that's win all the titles in his respective division. And Naoya Inoue, he recently moved up to Super Bantamweight after capturing all the titles at Bantamweight, and as well as winning the World Boxing Super Series tournament. And then in his first fight at Super Bantamweight, he took on the best Super Bantamweight champion in Stephen Fulton, and he beat him in a emphatic fashion, and he knocked out Stephen Fulton. And he did the same versus Marlon Tapales last week by knocking him out as well. And to sum up what happened in the fight, this was a one-sided fight prior to the knockout. I had this fight score 8-1 in favor of Naoya Inoue. Now, the only round that I had scored in favor of Tapales was the 7th round, and that's when the pace of the fight slowed down, and Tapales was able to land some significant blows at Naoya Inoue. And the opening round was a close round because that was more of a feel-out round for both fighters to get warmed up for the start of the fight. And then the rest of the fight was all Naoya Inoue. Tapales, he couldn't get his offense going because he couldn't place his foot in the right position for him to land that straight left. Now, Tapales is a southpaw stance fighter, and when a southpaw stance fighter fights a orthodox stance fighter, they tend to usually have the advantage over the orthodox stance fighter. And I'm talking about foot positioning. Usually the southpaw fighter tends to have their lead foot outside of the lead foot of the convenience stance fighter. Wasn't the case in this fight. Tapales couldn't get his lead foot to be outside of Naoya Inoue's lead foot. And for both opposite stance fighters, the key weapon for both the southpaw and the orthodox stance fighter is their straight backhand. And Naoya Inoue, he was more accurate throughout majority of the fight, and Tapales couldn't land that straight left because he couldn't get himself the right foot placement for him to set up the proper angle for him to be able to land those shots. Speaking about that straight left that a southpaw fighter would like to throw and gain success from versus the orthodox stance fighter. And he couldn't throw that straight down the center line because he couldn't create angles for himself to land that shot. And the most dividential punch for Tapales was the uppercut, and that's when he was able to get close to Naoya Inoue. And when Naoya Inoue wouldn't step on the gas pedal whenever Tapales would get near him. And Inoue, the way he fought this fight, he looked like Inoue as Inoue always looks, and that's him doing good with level changing, mixing his punches from going upstairs and downstairs, and trying to entrap his opponents by trying to have his opponents get overzealous and eager to want to exchange with Naoya Inoue, who carries very much power at the new weight class that he fights at, super bantamweight. He carries that same power that he carried at flyweight, super flyweight, bantamweight, and now at super bantamweight, because that's 2 straight knockouts, and he's only had 2 fights at super bantamweight, and it was against the 2 only champions at super bantamweight, and he knocked them out both, and he beat them convincingly and one-sidedly. And Naoya Inoue, he did a good job at using feints to bait Marlon Tapales in, and Tapales couldn't get in range to get anything going because Naoya Inoue would catch him with flurry of shots. And Naoya Inoue, not only does he place his punches very well, he's very good at putting combinations together. And with the power that he carries, even if those shots don't land flush, if it cracks through the guard of his opponent, it still does damage. And combinations of punches, if Naoya Inoue is throwing multiple of those, a few of those shots are going to land, and majority of them is going to crack through the guard of his opponent. And that's what was displayed in this fight versus Tapales. And the significance of Naoya Inoue's blows was showing out throughout the fight because it started to take its toll on Tapales. And Tapales, without a shadow of a doubt, respected the power of Naoya Inoue because he was hesitant to get in closer proximity to get anything going. And Naoya Inoue, being the taller fighter, took advantage of his height advantage to have leverage versus the shorter opponent. And when Tapales would get close, he would try and bring the fire and turn up the offense towards Naoya Inoue. But Naoya Inoue, with being the more powerful puncher, it was a bad game plan for Tapales to want to exchange and go blow for blow and stand toe-to-toe there with Naoya Inoue. And that's why Tapales couldn't really get any offense going even when he got close to Naoya Inoue because Naoya Inoue's shots had more impact than Tapales' shots. And Tapales, when he was able to make it more of a chess match and keep Inoue guessing by being fast on his feet and utilizing that quick in and out movement, that's when he would score some success towards Naoya Inoue. But Inoue, he controlled majority of the pace of the fight. And Tapales also was dropped in the 4th round after Naoya Inoue hit him with a flush right hand. And then that was the punch that ended the fight as well, that straight right hand that landed flush through the guard of Marlon Tapales that sent them back towards the ropes and forcing Tapales to take a knee, and he couldn't answer the referee's 10 count, and that's what called the halt to the bout. And this is yet another impressive good look of a victory for Naoya Inoue. And Naoya Inoue, he is a strong candidate of being crowned the fighter of the year for 2023. He became undisputed as Super Bantamweight, and he made his debut as Super Bantamweight at the summer of last year. And then in his only 2 fights as Super Bantamweight becomes undisputed. Immediately as he stepped up in a new division, he fought the best of the best, the only 2 champions that was at that weight class, and he defeated both of them in an emphatic statement-making fashion. And for Inoue to do that, that's a good look, and that's a great way to close out the year of 2023 and a strong way to head towards 2024. And Naoya Inoue, now he's rumored to fight a veteran as Super Bantamweight, Luis Neri. He's ranked as the #1 contender according to 3 of the 4 major title organizations when it comes to their Super Bantamweight rankings. I think by the WBC, the WBO, and the IBF, Luis Neri is their #1 ranked contender, and that would be a tough challenge for Naoya Inoue to defend his undisputed Super Bantamweight titles. Now, there's more competition for Naoya Inoue as Super Bantamweight than at Bantamweight because other than Yoel Casimero and Guillermo Rigondeaux, he fought every opponent that he could fight at Bantamweight. Now, Guillermo Rigondeaux can fluctuate between Super Bantamweight and Bantamweight. That fight can still have a potential of happening sometime in the future, and that would be also a tough challenge for Naoya Inoue. Stylistically speaking, Guillermo Rigondeaux is a difficult fight for any fighter to fight against. And Yoel Casimero, he hasn't fought outside of Bantamweight yet, but that's the only fight that I thought was left for Naoya Inoue before he decided to move up to Super Bantamweight. Now, I don't know if Yoel Casimero, after having to vacate the WBO Bantamweight title, and I don't know if Casimero has any interest in wanting to move up to Super Bantamweight to make that fight that many boxing fans want to see happen, possibly sometime in the future, between Inoue and Casimero. Now, that would be a marketable fight for Casimero more than it would be for Naoya Inoue, because Inoue is recognized as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world right now. And Naoya Inoue is getting his name to be more reputable, and he's already got a big fan base in his home country of Japan, and that's where he has majority of his fights being hosted. He's fought in the Western Hemisphere before, but he fights more in his own nativity. And because he has successful turnout of events whenever he has his fights being hosted out there, and that's why I don't see him stepping out of Japan to have his next fight being hosted in the Western Hemisphere, and Luis Neri being a fighter that isn't from the Eastern Hemisphere and has majority of his fights being hosted in America. And because this weight class doesn't tend to have a lot of attention, and that's why I could see the next fight for Naoya Inoue, if he does take on what is rumored to be his next opponent, it will most likely happen in Japan, because I'm quite sure Luis Neri and his team and his promotion wouldn't mind going overseas to have a shot at the Undisputed Super Bantamweight title and having a big feel of a fight out there where Naoya Inoue has a huge fan base at. And Luis Neri, as I said, he's a veteran. He's been fighting at an elite level in the Super Bantamweight division. And that's why it would call for a good fight for both fighters, but more importantly, for the sport of boxing's sake. And that's a fight that I'd like to see happen next. And as far as Naoya Inoue, I don't think he's going to want to drop his Undisputed Super Bantamweight title like he did immediately after winning all the titles at Bantamweight, because he competed at Bantamweight for quite a while. And for him to want to move up to featherweight when he's only had 2 fights at Super Bantamweight wouldn't make sense. And I would say it would be a rush of a move for Naoya Inoue to want to do that. I think he'll want to gain more legitimacy and more experience at fighting at this new weight class that he just recently made his debut at this year at Super Bantamweight, and keep on defending his Undisputed Super Bantamweight title the same way he did at Bantamweight. And another good fight that would be, locally speaking, for the Japanese boxing scene would be a fight with Naoya Inoue versus the current number 1 ranked contender according to the WBA. His name is Tomoki Komita, who's the number 1 ranked contender when it comes to the WBA Super Bantamweight rankings. He's been on a 4-fight win streak, and his latest defeat came from Ray Vargas via decision, and that was for the WBC Super Bantamweight title when Ray Vargas was competing at Super Bantamweight. And Komita, he is a Japanese fighter as well. If Naoya Inoue is to fight the number 1 ranked contender, and him being the undisputed champion at Super Bantamweight, holding all the titles at Super Bantamweight, this fight would be a sensible fight to make happen. And it would be legitimate because Komita is number 1 ranked by at least one of the titles that Naoya Inoue holds right now. And it would be a good look for the local Japanese boxing scene with both fighters being based out of Japan. And Naoya Inoue, as I had mentioned before, he has majority of his fights being hosted in Japan. That's why this fight would be a good look for Naoya Inoue. Now, is this fight on paper a competitive fight when compared to the competitiveness on paper as the fight with Stephen Fulton and Marlon Tapales? No, but it's still a sensible fight and a marketable fight to make happen, especially for the local Japanese boxing scene. And it would be, I wouldn't say a momentum derailer for Naoya Inoue, because it would be a step down from the ladder of competition, but he's already fought the top two fighters that was at Super Bantamweight. The only two champions that was at Super Bantamweight. He's already beat them, and Luis Neri is the more recognized name at Super Bantamweight, and he is ranked as the number one contender by 3 out of the 4 title organizations, unlike Kamita, who's only ranked number 1 by 1 out of the 4 title organizations at Super Bantamweight. And that's why the fight versus Luis Neri is not only more marketable and would be a continuation of Naoya Inoue's current streak of fighting the best quality opponents, but it wouldn't hurt Naoya Inoue for him to fight Kamita either. And I would say Luis Neri is the better fighter when you compare the two fighters, Kamita and Neri. But as I have said, he could fight either one of these number 1 ranked contenders. Or he could have a fight versus Akhmadaliev, who was a former Super Bantamweight champion who Tapales defeated in decision to win the titles at Super Bantamweight prior to fighting Naoya Inoue. That would be a tough test for Naoya Inoue as well. And then there's Risi Alim, who's ranked highly by all the title organizations when it comes to their Super Bantamweight rankings, and as well as many boxing media outlets as well. And then there's Sam Goodman, who defeated Risi Alim via split decision. That was a competitive bout, and he could fight either Sam Goodman or Risi Alim as well. Now, the fight that I want to see next for Naoya Inoue would be a fight versus Luis Neri, if not Kamita or any of those guys that I have mentioned during this post-fight video as a future possible opponent for Naoya Inoue to defend his undisputed Super Bantamweight titles against. Now, that does it for this post-fight video. Subscribe to this channel for more content. Share this content if y'all like this video as well. Click the links in the description to show y'all support for this channel. Anything would be appreciated. And that does it for this post-fight video. I'm out of here, y'all. Be good and peace.